and Alex
Did you see Alex there?
I did.
And did you have any conversation with him at that conference about the $192,000 that you covered for him when he was going to pay that back?
I believe I asked him about it, and he indicated he was working on it. Some discussion about his father's estate. His father had just passed, and there would be money coming from the estate, and then with Maggie's estate being tied up, also.
Did he say he might sell some property or something like
I
that?
think he did mention that he was working towards selling some property.
At this point in time, still with a couple of months after the tragic murders of Maggie and Paul, were you still very sensitive to your friend's emotional health and well-being?
Sure. I didn't push him.
Didn't push it?
Yes, sir.
Some point after that conference where you asked him about it, didn't want to push him, did you have another conversation with him about when that money might be paid?
I believe I did, yes, sir.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 350 for this hearing. See if you recognize that.
I do.
Tell me what that is.
It is a very rudimentary, handwritten, scratched out promissory note that I asked Alex to sign for me, which he did August 17th of 2021. Acknowledging that I had loaned him $192,000 that he would repay within 60 days, I think is what it says.
And tell me how the circumstances of how you came to get this, essentially on a folded piece of paper. This is a copy of it, right?
It is, yes, sir.
All right, tell me about it, please.
That was more about, I wanted to get repaid my money as quickly as possible, but that was more about, I was concerned, just like everybody else, everybody in his firm and everybody in his family, that he was going to do something to himself, that he was going to kill himself. And I knew enough to know that that I couldn't make a claim against his estate if there wasn't something in writing. And so that was more, I went to him and said, Alex, look, I hate to even ask this, but I need to ask you to do this in case something happens to you. And I phrased it like if you get hit by a car or something, but it was more worried about what he might do. And I need to ask you to do this so that if there's a problem, I can deal with it. And he did. He didn't have a problem with it.
You already said this part, but at some point a few weeks later, you get a call from Lee Cope asking about those fees and saying that Alex had been stealing money, right?
Yes, sir.
That hit you like a thunderbolt?
It knocked me down. I was with a group of guys. I could not talk. Lee told me he could not talk very long. I didn't know how to react.
Did you try to get in touch with Alex?
I did. I couldn't do it immediately. I think I spoke to Lee for just a minute. He told me I needed to call him right back. I called him back. We talked for just a minute. He couldn't talk long. He said he had other things to take care of to deal with all of what was going on.
Do you remember what day this is?
September 3rd, Friday, 3:00 in the afternoon.
2021?
2021. Yes, sir.
You remember it like it was yesterday?
I'll tell you exactly where I was and who I was with.
Tell me more about what happened.
I finished up what I was doing with that group. I think I tried to call Alex, or I know I texted him. And I believe I tried to call also, and I couldn't get him.
Did you continue to try to contact him?
I did. I think he did respond maybe that afternoon later and said, I forget what it was. It was in a meeting or something. I'll call you back as soon as I can. But at some point in time, I kept trying to get him, and we did talk later.
All right. What did you talk about? What day was that when you finally were able to talk to him?
I think I did speak to him that evening, this Friday, September the 3rd, by phone. I don't remember exactly the conversation, but I said, look, Lee's called me and told me what's going on. What is going on? He said, I really can't talk about it much right now. I said, I need to talk to you, and I want it to be in person. I need to know what's going on. And
what happened next?
Well, he said he would try to meet with me the next morning, and that he was sorry. And I don't remember all the gist of that conversation, but the next morning I tried to call him. I woke up and I started driving towards Beaufort because I thought he was staying at John Marvin's house down that way. And I started calling him and driving his direction. And eventually he called me back and said he would meet me in Alameda at his mom and daddy's house.
Did you meet him there?
I did.
Was that in the morning of September 4th?
Probably a little bit before lunchtime, kind of late morning. Yes, sir.
Did y'all have a conversation?
We did.
Where was the conversation?
I got there before he did. I don't think I pulled in the driveway. I kind of waited out on the road, pulled in the driveway. We went in the side door. The caregiver was there. We went out onto the front porch and we talked on the front porch.
And what did he say to you?
I mean, the first thing I asked him was, Alec, what the F or what the H is going on here? What is going on? And have you done something else to me or that involves me that I don't know about? Because I know about this and I've got to deal with this, but is there something else you've done that I don't know about that I need to be concerned with?
And what did he say?
He broke down crying. Said I can't right this second. He went inside, came back out with some paper towels and told me that he had a drug problem, that he was addicted to opioids, and that he had been addicted for, I don't remember if he said 20 or 20 plus years, but for 20 years or so.
Did he say anything about the money?
He told me that he had been stealing money.
Did he have a particular phrase about what he had done to you?
Shit me up.
He said he shit you up.
Shit me up or shit me off or something like that. But I think it was he'd shit me up.
And he said that he admitted to you he had been stealing client money.
Yes, sir.
So he confessed that to you. Is that
He
correct?
said he had shit a lot of people up.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 313 in this in-camera hearing. Do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
I think this is the original of that $225,000 fee check written in the gentleman's case directly to Richard Alexander Murdaugh, Esquire.
Is that your signature on it?
It is.
How did that conversation end?
I don't remember exactly how it ended, Mr. Works. I was so mad. I'd loved the guy for so long. And I probably still loved him a little bit, but I was so mad. And I don't remember how it ended. I left. I asked him, how did I not know these things or see these things? And we talked. He was concerned about me getting my $192,000 back. Seemed concerned. Told him I wasn't worried about that. At that point, I wanted to make sure there wasn't something else.
This is a little bit before lunch on September 4th.
Yes, sir.
You eventually,
We didn't leave. I'm sure I yelled at the beginning or at least raised my voice, but I didn't leave yelling and screaming and hollering. We didn't fight. But I left. I wasn't happy.
Where'd you go after you left? You remember?
I rode through Hampton. Actually, we through Hardee's and grabbed something for a bite of lunch on the road and headed back to Columbia where I live.
That day, did you hear anything else about Alec?
I did.
About how long after you left Alec did you hear something?
I had stopped in my office in Bamberg or at the post office to pick something up. And I was somewhere between Bamberg and Columbia when I got a call. It was either from Randy or Lee Coke, but I believe it was Lee Coke.
informed?
That Alec had been shot in the head and that he was on a helicopter going to the hospital in Savannah. And I think it was Savannah Hospital, but they said the hospital, but I believe they said Savannah Hospital.
What'd you do in response to that information?
What the devil's going on? I thought he tried to kill himself. I didn't think he was suicidal when I left, but when I heard that, I thought he tried to kill himself.
Did you go to the scene, or did you return back home?
I went back home.
Did you try to reach out to Alec after that?
I did not. I talked to his brother, Randy, I think some that same day and some on the next day. But by that time, frankly, all this had, for lack of a better term, blown up to where I didn't think I'd be able to talk to Alec. And I don't know that I wanted to.
Have you had a conversation with him since?
I have not spoken to him since that morning at Alameda.
Have you had any other communication with him?
He's texted me once or twice, to which I've responded something very generic, like I'm thinking about your family. And I think he may have written a letter, some short letter that, frankly, I turned over to my lawyers.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 351. See if you recognize that.
I do.
And what is that?
This is one of the texts that I received from Alec and my response.
Is that a number you previously had recognized being Alex?
I don't know if I'd ever seen that number before, but it's not the normal cell phone number that I would have used to contact him or he to contact me. I mean, there was sometimes he'd tell me he was calling me from the phone in his car. Sometimes it would be a number I didn't recognize.
Screen there.
Yes, sir.
Does it say, "So sorry for all the havoc I created for you. I'd do anything to make it right"?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. That's all the questions for this in-camera hearing, Your Honor.
By the defense.
We have no questions, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Wilson. Take care. How many more witnesses do you anticipate on this matter?
There's a lot of moving parts, Your Honor. I do have a law firm witness that I would like to call on this particular matter, one of the partners. We have the Satterfield matter. There is a confession of judgment, but we can present testimony on that as well. And we have a bank witness to establish the financial condition of Alec at the time these murders happened, which was he was burning through cash like crazy. He was out of options. The $792,000 was gone in no time at all. And I think the evidence is very compelling that for an extended period of time, he had been living in a velocity of money that is really quite stunning. And he constantly had to achieve more money to avoid the reckoning that was happening. I'm sorry, and so it will show on that particular day that on June 7th, 2021, when he's being asked about these Ferris fees, the financial condition is not good. There's not that money there. He's extremely leveraged in the debt that he has, and it will be part of a history where he is forced to do all these things that we've been showing through Ms. Seconder to stay afloat and to stay one step ahead. And for the jury to understand the reality of what he was facing, they have to understand the extent of what is being potentially exposed. They have to understand why he would be doing these things and why he was out of time. This is not the kind of case where, and I don't know if you want legal argument at this point, but
Well, I have a question.
yes, sir.
I guess this is still your answer. I don't know.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Judge. So anyway, this is the kind of case where, for example, he mentions the boat case out of the gate. The boat case, the hearing was going to be that week. We will establish evidence that the hearing was to get access or get identification of his accounts. Once that happens, that he would be unable, there would be not long before what had been going on would be exposed. And what we're talking about, and this is really how it's different from some of the other res geste and other cases that you're looking at, is it's really about the fear of what is about to be exposed. And what we're talking about, again, is a decade of malfeasance and misappropriation that ultimately would result in the charges that it's resulted in, as well as loss of his livelihood and loss of his law degree. And that's the real fear that was there. And when we look at June 7th in particular, at that point in time, he's out of options. We've heard from Ms. Sechinger that in the past, if he'd been able to pay that money or repay that money, then he could always kick that can down the road. But on this particular day, the state believes we have evidence, and we believe it's a reasonable inference from those evidence that he was out of options. But for the jury to really understand what's going on, they have to understand the full picture of what this man has been doing and what he's been trying to hide. And frankly, what he was able to successfully hide in the wake of these murders. The bank witnesses will also establish, relevant specifically to this particular witness and the events that you've heard about, is that one of the first things that Mr. Murdaugh did, business related, was to secure $600,000. He got a loan from PSB, Palmetto State Banks, that wasn't even on the books. They just wired the money. Russell Lafitte wired the money, $350. He borrowed $250,000 from another person, and that's the $600 that he gave to Chris, that he used to talk Chris into telling PMPED that all $792 were back in the account. And so again, that's one of the first things he did to stave off the inquiry that very morning, 6/7/21, was to get that money in there, and it did. It staved off the inquiry. The fact that Ms. Sechinger, there have been a number of things that have been occurring over a while, ultimately turned her attention back to Alec. It doesn't change the fact that it did effectively delay that time period and delay the ultimate detection of that. And he was able to put that money in, much as he was able to do when he stole $125,000 from his brother, or he used the firm credit card, or what we see throughout this, throughout the extent of his financial matters. So the bank witness ultimately will establish two things. Number one is the financial condition at the time, and number two, his efforts in the wake of the murders to secure that additional money so that he could get enough back to Chris Wilson to talk him into telling the law firm that there was nothing to see here, that everything was okay. And frankly, it worked until two things happened. Number one, Ms. Sechinger started to look back at the Hirschberg matter. And then more importantly, and we have another law firm witness. I don't know the check's up on the screen. Stand by for me, Your Honor. They found this check right here, this very one, in his office right around that same time in early September. And at that point in time, they knew that he had been lying to them about these particular fees. And that's what caused everything to unravel. And then, just like we see, Your Honor, with what happened on June 7th, 2021, within a short period of time, the side of the road happens. And Alec immediately claims that he was the victim of a horrible attack, and everyone immediately assumes that the bad guys are back. There's a symmetry, Your Honor, between what happens on the side of the road and what happens on June 7th, because when the hounds are at the door, when Hannibal's at the gates for Alex Murdaugh, violence happens. And the same thing happened on the side of the road that happened on June 7th. And for this jury to understand the real picture of this man, that I will remind Your Honor, I know you're well aware of, that they have already repeatedly put into issue his character and what a loving father he was and all the rest of it. They need to understand really what this man was hiding. And he was hiding something we have never seen before. And the pressures of that are important for the jury to understand why this man might do that.
Mr. Griffin, any comments you'd like to make?
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to respond. What you've heard thus far today does not establish that Hannibal's at the gate in any form or fashion. What you heard from Ms. Seconder, is that what's the language she used? Hang on, I've got it right here. Quote, there's a history of trust and brotherhood in the firm, and that some similar events have happened in the past where Alec had been overdrawn with the firm through, loan checks or expense checks, and that eventually the money gets paid back and everyone goes about their merry way. I mean, that is basically what she testified to, Your Honor, and this sort of concept that Alec committed murders to cause a delay in the firm investigating this diversion of fees was debunked by her own testimony, where she said, number one, Mr. Randolph Murdaugh was going back in the hospital to die, and that I stopped in my tracks and I became a friend and stopped looking, and that Mr. Murdaugh did die. I mean, that's what stopped her conversation, and that's what stopped her inquiry on June the 7th by her own testimony. And then you go forward, and then she says she passed it off to Lee Cope. And then Lee Cope kept following up, and he communicated with Mr. Wilson. And Mr. Wilson sent an email. Alec had gotten money back into the account. And frankly, Your Honor, if this plays out, as we attach to our response, the draft transcript from the trial testimony in Russell Lafitte's case, that Mr. Murdaugh had in progress at Palmetto State Bank a loan application to get refinancing, and that Maggie's murder stopped and delayed that. And it had the complete opposite effect. He wasn't at the end of his rope. The murder of Maggie, if we have to play out this, the murder of Maggie actually caused a delay in the refinancing of the Edisto house, and it precluded getting additional loans from Moselle. And so those are the facts. And how murdering Maggie Murdaugh and murdering Paul Murdaugh eased his financial stress, it didn't. There's no financial gain, as we said. There's no life insurance. There's nothing to be gained by it. And so there's no logical connection from his, disastrous financial house and potentially having to be answer to financial misconduct within the firm, losing his law license, being criminally prosecuted first. And it's all just a theory. There's no facts. It's all just a theory. But the theory is the best way out is for him to murder his wife and son and put himself bullseye in that circle that you heard about in the testimony of this case, and that he is prime suspect number one because he's the father, he's the husband, he finds the bodies, they show up and he's holding a shotgun, and he does that to get out from under scrutiny of a $700,000 diversion of fees with a history of trust and brotherhood in that law firm. Your Honor, there is no logical connection whatsoever, and it does not lead to evidence of motive. And we can have more testimony, but frankly, Your Honor, it doesn't meet. And then if we go into 403 and unfair prejudice, you heard a lot of unfair prejudice here, but the undue delay, confusion of the issues to the jury, they've got a whole lot more evidence about financial misconduct than they have about a murder and evidence of guilt in the murder case. And that's what this is all about.
With regard to the list of other witnesses that Mr. Waters indicates that the state has, for purposes of the court being able to do an analysis as to whether there's clear and convincing evidence, you vindicated with regard to some of the witnesses, some of the files you do not or did not contest them. But if you have a few employees from the law firm, including Lee Cope, Mr. Murdaugh's secretary or administrative assistant, excluding someone from the bank. Who's the other person you mentioned?
Well, we have also the Satterfield, which of course we have a confession of judgment for, again, for purposes of this hearing, that might be sufficient for the court's analysis, although the circumstances I think are very relevant. And then with the boat case, the one thing I want to add, and that would be Mark Tinsley in the boat case, is to understand the context of the boat case and understand how this all relates to everything. Is not only was the discovery there, being sought by Mr. Tinsley, but there will be testimony. And again, this is all in transcripts, which they have. And I don't know, I've talked with the defense about, obviously they don't have to concede and they'll be able to cross and all the rest of it. But, it is in transcripts. They've had a chance to review it, whether or not that's sufficient, at least for an in-camera determination. But one of the things that Mark Tinsley will say was the very aggressive posture which they were taking in the boat case, which meant that Alex Murdaugh was not a defendant of convenience, that the goal of the litigation, at least as it related to him, was a personal recovery. And that is why he was proceeding so aggressively in that particular case. Mark Tinsley will also say that, and we'll talk about how that litigation was going, but we'll also say that after the crimes of June 7th, 2021, that landscape completely changed. This was an extremely significant liability, and the testimony will be that that aggressive posture, seeking a personal recovery from Alex Murdaugh, actually of $10 million, that they weren't coming off that, and that was the manner in which that litigation was going. Once the murders happened, that was done, and Mr. Tinsley will testify to that, at least the posture that they were taking.
Well, the court has heard sufficient amount of, received sufficient amount of evidence to make a determination regarding clear and convincing evidence involving the law firm, and I do not need to hear from Mr. Cope or the other witness, what's her name? Ms. Griswold, in order to make that determination of there being clear and convincing evidence. With regard to Satterfield, you do have a confession of judgment, which the court has not seen or reviewed. With regard to the boat case, there's been no testimony. In the record, regarding the impact of that on Mr. Murdaugh's state of mind or the like. So Mr. Tinsley, particularly considering the representations by counsel that the plaintiffs in that case were just seeking a financial statement, basically. And so the court can hear from Mr. Tinsley, review the confession of judgment, then hear arguments from the parties once again regarding the admissibility of all of this as relates to these other bad acts, and also the limitation on this, if any.
Two matters right now. I do have the confession of judgment, which I can mark, as well as the disbarment.
don't believe the rules require a full-blown trial on these matters for the court to make a determination of clear and convincing evidence.
I do have one, two issues. It would be, of course, we have the bank witnesses to establish that financial condition. And there's that.
The
Which
bank witness is also included. I overlooked mentioning the bank witness.
I do have a pride, and that we can definitely do that in the morning. I do have a problem, unfortunately, that Mr. Tinsley is not available in the morning, but can be here first thing Monday morning, Your Honor. We can handle the bank witnesses in the morning.
All right.
And again, we do have a transcript.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, we have filed a separate motion with the court on the admissibility of essentially Mr. Tinsley's testimony for any consideration by the court, because he's giving, a legal opinion. It's a judicial decision. It's not Mr. Tinsley's decision. And we've submitted that to the court. So we don't think anything Mr. Tinsley has to say would be relevant. We'd be prepared to argue that tomorrow or tonight if you'd like.
Well, I haven't received that motion.
Here's a clocked in copy.
When was it clocked in?
January 24th, 2023.
January 24th. Last Tuesday? When was that? Last Tuesday?
Seems like yesterday.
That was last week.
I did say that I didn't realize that was pertaining to Mr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Well, we'll address Mr. Tinsley's issue when Mr. Tinsley is available. I cannot conclude based on argument that his testimony will only be relate to a question of law. So we'll defer anything, any presentation until Mr. Tinsley is available, and then we can press on with the other witnesses tomorrow morning before the jury gets here at 11:30. We'll start at 9:30. Hopefully that 2-hour window will be sufficient with a break in there somewhere. Regarding the Satterfield matter, what's the defense's position on that?
Your Honor, we agree that they have a confession of judgment. We agree that there's an order disbarring him for that conduct, and they concluded that confession of judgment, even though it has a disclaimer. Anyway, the Supreme Court concluded that is an admission. So for purposes of disbarment, and I'd be hard pressed to argue against that satisfying, clear, and convincing standard. That's all.
And what year was that? The wrongful conduct.
Well, yeah, well, the Satterfield matter, I don't have it off the top of my head, but it was quite some time ago.
2019, 20.
Satterfield issue separately. Aside from the court determining just the issues in general regarding whether or not this testimony should be admitted on motive, identity, common scheme, race geste, there's a separate issue regarding remoteness. And of course, I know the state believes that this is a thread that's woven through all of one thing to the other that culminates in the conduct on June 7th. We'll hear arguments on that later.
Your Honor, not to belabor the point, the additional ground would be consciousness of guilt, which is a basis for admissibility. And again, that's kind of what we're talking about. I mean, that goes under 404, but the case law is long. The consciousness of guilt is fear of detection is a basis
You
for
submitted something on that?
I'll get you some additional cases on that, Your Honor. We'll have that for you by tomorrow.
All right.
Not sure what act he is going under the consciousness of guilt prong to the extent it exists. I don't know what he's talking about.
I don't know either. We'll see.
Well, again, he's trying to avoid facing life without parole and the loss of his livelihood. And for the jury to understand that, it's more than just $792,000. It's this entire time period. And that is really the issue, is avoiding that detection.
Okay, well, we've done enough on this day. We'll resume at 9:30.